Welcome to my review for the 2003 remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, if you've been with me throughout my review series so far, you'll know that I gave the first film 5 out of 5, complete masterpiece as far as I'm concerned, but I've had a real hard time getting through 2, 3 and Next Generation. I gave weak scores to all 3 of those films, but I had much higher hopes for this 5th film in the series, partly because it's got such a good reputation. Lots of people say that this is one of the best in the series. I've even heard some voices say it's better than the original. Secondly, because it's a remake, it's a chance for a fresh start narratively. There's no complicated mythology I've sort of got to wrap my head around. There's no text crawls going up the screen at the start, which doesn't seem to align itself with what we've seen before. In fact, the other night, I was so much looking forward to this that I changed my viewing order of my review episodes. Originally, I was meant to do something else before this, but at the last minute, I thought, you know what, I really want to get that Texas Chainsaw remake on, so I got the Blu-ray out and off I went. In terms of story, there's not really much need to give you a synopsis if you've seen the original. It's 5 kids in a camper van going across Texas, and they stumble into Sawyer country, except now it's Hewitt country. They've changed the name of the family. In fact, they've changed a lot of things in this film, but the broad outline is more or less the same. So what did I think of it? Well, I have to admit, sadly, my reaction is mixed. I'm not one of these people who thinks that this is an amazing remake. I do think it's better than the previous 3, although that wouldn't have been difficult, but I certainly wouldn't place this anywhere near the same company as Tobe Hooper's original. So sadly, I do have almost as many negatives to get through as positives today, but I will start with the good stuff just to get some goodwill going. So I guess I'll start with the end chase. What an absolutely amazing finale. I have to say, I was a little bit mentally disengaged by the movie up until that point. That final chase saved the film for me in some respects. There's only one bit I don't like, which is when Erin, played by Jessica Biel, is escaping from the cellar and Leatherface's chainsaw just happens to go off in that moment, and then he gets it back on again. And there's this weird moment where he gets to the bottom of the stairs and he can clearly just kill her, I think, at that point, but for some reason he doesn't. Maybe the 2 actors were just out of sync with each other at that particular moment, I don't know. But once everybody gets out of the cellar, it's a brilliant chase. They go to an abandoned house and then a slaughterhouse. It's just brilliant. That moment where she cuts off his arm, I just thought that was incredibly good. I did not expect that. And then there's a moment where Leatherface comes on the road at the end and he's just one-armed at this point, swinging his chainsaw around. Brilliant. Just love the closing 15 minutes to this. Leatherface himself has gone back to being scary in this film. There's none of that silliness which crept into some of the earlier films. You know, there's no silly sort of expressions like, You know, I think Texas 2 might have been the film where he was doing that the most. I'd still say that Gunnar Hansen's version is the best of all. And I'd also say that the Leatherface from Next Generation is better than this, that creepy one where he's dressed up as a woman most of the time. But this would be 3rd for me. Still very good. And I'm not even interested which is 4th or 5th out of those other 2. Now, my other big positive for the movie is Jessica Biel as Erin. I'd heard so many good things about this final girl, and I wasn't disappointed. I mean, I wouldn't say that she blew me away. If I was going to do a final girls ranking video tomorrow, I'm not sure that I would be putting her on it. But she's still very high quality. Obviously, she's extremely hot. She can definitely act, this actress. I've not seen her in anything else, bizarrely. But she was very good, and the character was easy to get behind. So, I mean, look, she's made it into my positive section. That should be enough, but not one of my favourites of all time. There are several other cool moments throughout, which spoke to some really creative filmmaking, actually, the likes of which that we didn't really see in the previous 3 films. I mean, they were shot like TV movies for the most part. So I'll give you an example. I like the way that this story is bookended by the sheriff in the modern day going down into the cellar with his camera, and then later on we get the payoff of Leatherface still being down there. I thought that was a good way to begin and end the film. There's also this cool shot of all the main characters just playing around at a lake. Now, if you've only seen this film once, you might have missed this if you were looking down at your coffee or something, because it's literally 2 seconds long. But I was impressed by the fact that they went to all this trouble of filming this scene for so little film. It's a nice little image of the character's innocence that we get before we then flash forward to their horrible, fateful day. And I've also got to mention this one other scene a bit later on at a store run by a middle-aged woman, and she's got this meat counter which has just got all these flies in it. I mean, these villains are not even trying to hide their hive of villainy from whoever goes past. The sheriff is probably my final positive. He's sort of like an updated version of the Jim Sidow character from the first 2 movies. I love his introduction. He comes on and goes, And then he walks around the back of this car and comes out with this one line. It's really funny. I can't remember what it is. He reminds me of the sheriff from Dusk Till Dawn, except obviously this is a much more evil version. And he acts like he's the sheriff of Texas rather than just the sheriff of some small little town. He's really funny. I'm not a massive fan of what they do with this character throughout the rest of the film, though. In fact, this is a good way, a good time for me to transition into my negatives, actually, by just carrying on talking about the sheriff. So the protagonists slowly start to realise that this guy is not all that he seems, but his presence in this scene, or string of scenes, just goes on for way too long. And I don't know if it's by look or by design, but he picks on the weakest member of the pack. I mean, watching Morgan sit there snivelling and crying his way through that scene in the car is so frustrating. I just wanted a cool as cucumber kid sat there instead, stony-faced and just biding his time, waiting for the right opportunity to blow that sheriff's brains out. Now that would have got me jumping off the couch and cheering. I get that Erin kills him later on and that's meant to be the big hooray moment, but Elvis has left the building by that point. I didn't really care. It's not Erin's revenge to take anyway, it was Morgan's. I wanted to see Morgan get this guy. That's not my biggest complaint about the film though. My biggest complaint is the death of the suicide girl near the start. Now, I don't want to be that guy who goes, well, that's not how they did it in the original. But in this instance, I think it's a fair comparison because the scary thing about the hitchhiker in the first film getting into that van was the fact that this could have happened on any road in the world. You know, some random, drunken, whacked out guy cutting himself and, you know, doing weird things with his lighter. And then you've got the awkward situation where you've got to try and get him out somehow before the situation escalates. Could happen to anybody. Then later on, there was the payoff of knowing that the hitchhiker wasn't just being mean to Sally Hardesty at the dinner table out of some psychosis. He was doing it as some dim-witted revenge for his rejection by Sally and her friends earlier on. The death of the suicide girl, though, is just a plot contrivance to get the van driving where the plot wants it to drive. And there's no way she's killing herself in that van. If she'd have killed herself, it was going to be on the road at the point where she wouldn't have had much hope that anybody but the Hewitts was going to catch up to her. But once she gets in the van, that's the safest she's been all day. She's not going to kill herself at that point. To put it bluntly, I ain't buying what they're selling. I also had some problems with the scenes that take place up at the house where the guy with no legs lives. I don't know if this is meant to be the same house that Erin escapes from later on, but anyway, that first house, if it is a different house, it looks like something out of a dream sequence. It's a really odd architectural choice for a film like this. Also, when Andy's trying to escape from it, there are a couple of moments that really bug me. So he gets his tyre iron stuck under the old guy's wheelchair and he spends about half an hour trying to pry this thing out. Leatherface is coming through the door behind him. I'm thinking to myself, just get out of here, kid. This is about flight, not fight. You're not going to take Leatherface on with that tyre iron. Just get out of here. He does make it outside eventually, but for some reason he runs into the laundry. Now, we've already seen a couple of establishing shots that show the laundry being nowhere near the front door. There's loads of space to run into. It's daylight. He's not going to trip over anything. A young, fit, athletic guy like him, if this had been a real situation, he would have been out of here like a jackrabbit. But instead, he decides to run into the laundry where he's going to be slowed down to like 2 miles per hour. He's patting bed sheets away. Just no. I think my final complaint about the film is just that so few Hewitts die. Just 1 out of 5 die. The sheriff. Now, I'm not saying that all the bad guys in every horror film have to die. One of the great things I love about this genre is the unpredictability. Every time you put a horror film on, you don't know if the good guys are going to die, the bad guys are going to die. But when it comes to these Texas Chainsaw sequels and follow-ups, I just dislike all of these scumbags so much in every single film. I just want all of them to die, and especially because they change the group that Leatherface is with every single time. I don't know if they were planning on possibly doing a sequel after this instead of a prequel, but could they really have done that with a one-armed Leatherface? I don't know. But when I think of the people still left alive at the end of this film, especially that annoying girl who wanted a baby and her buddy from the caravan and Leatherface's mum, yeah, it bugs me that just 1 out of 5 of them die. It really does. So to move on to my final summary, this is very much a mixed bag of a film for me. Just before we go to the bag of terror to get a score for it, though, I'll quickly show you the Blu-ray I have for this. I think it's the first Blu-ray I've bought for this series. It's got 3 commentary tracks on it, which is pretty cool. They're labelled production commentary, technical commentary, and story commentary. I watched the story commentary the other night because that's the thing that I'm most interested in when it comes to learning more about how films were put together. And I have to admit that listening to Jessica Biel and her co-stars talk about the making of this film, it did make me like it a little bit more than when I actually watched it. And that end chase sequence looks just as good even when people are talking over the thing. Right, let's find out what that score is. We have 2.5 bloody axes for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. That puts it a league above the previous 3 films, but still way behind the original. I think it's okay. I didn't fall in love with it, but there's some stuff in here that I could like. Right, I will be back soon to review Texas Chainsaw The Beginning. I think the 6th film is called. I think it's a prequel to this one that I'm reviewing today, Joy. So presumably we're going to see the sheriff again and some of these Hewitt characters. But until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.